Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for watching again. My name is Severin and today we're speaking about the full moon in Virgo on the 27th of February 2021. And I hope you have had a chance to watch the video that I was posting 2 weeks ago, in which I shared with you the most important new moon, which was in Aquarius of this year. And I still believe that's true. And as you know, a new moon is simply kind of setting the foundation or planting a new seed, and then gradually that new insight that's coming to fruition in us is awakened by the full moon that we are in right now. And that simply means, guys, this is the most important full moon of the year. And I think we're going to look back at this time and realize, wow, that was where it all started. February 2001 was where this crazy inner battle started. There was this inner fight of like an old version of me, of how I saw myself, of how I lived my life, of how I saw the world, and how I was living in security and in a way of functioning. And suddenly there was this new me awakening, something I didn't even understand where it came from. I was almost afraid at the beginning. I was questioning it, and maybe I thought it would just come up and go away again, but it stayed. And then I suddenly had to pay attention for it, because it was really questioning who I am. And is this full moon, like, who are you meant to be? It's a big question with a big question mark, and you don't have to have an answer yet. We can simply explore it together, and I want to share more with you about it. But I think it's really a big one. And not just this full moon, but actually to understand as a bigger picture. What does that mean? Well, guys, this is actually a bigger picture that's just starting to happen right now, because Uranus and Saturn are squaring each other. So there's this big fight. Saturn is the old versus Uranus the new, fighting with each other, like, who is right? Am I my old self, that I have been living for or with, like, for the last 10 years? Or is that new me that's creeping through that little cracks in me? Which one is right? And that we don't have to have a fight. So these two I want to explore with you and speak more about. But first, before we go there, let me share with you that I have found the courage and the playfulness to go on Instagram, and I made the commitment to myself to make a little video for the next 3 months, for every day to simply show up and share more about my daily insights about astrology and share that with you. So also, if you want to know more about astrology, not just on every 2 weeks, then follow me there. But I also want to become more relatable, more vulnerable, and hopefully just being more myself and sharing myself with you on a daily level and connect more on that. So if you would like to follow me there and be friends, again on another platform, then simply put in my name, Severin Geser, and we can connect over that platform even more. All right. So let me speak a little bit about Saturn and Uranus, which simply represent, and that's the theme for the entire year of 2021. And that's why I want to paint a bigger picture, that we really understand that there is the crumbling of the old versus the liberation or the insight of something new within us. And we could say there's a whole demolition happening, like it's an attack on our personality or our belief structure and how we see and relate towards ourselves, that brings us into a whole new perspective of who we are, or maybe of who we are not. And that brings us then into a whole change of how we see the world or how we engage with the world around us. And I can simply say this is happening. The old Saturn battling with the new Uranus is happening 3 times this year. First time on the 17th of February, so it already has happened, but we're in the midst of it, because it's not just on one day. It's like, you could say, a week before and the week after. So it's fully alive in us right now. And normally the most intense is the first moment. Then we have a second time by the middle of June, in which Saturn is retrograde and Uranus is direct, so Uranus energy is even stronger. And then we have a last one in which the integration is happening a little bit more by the end of the year. So on the 24th of December, the third time is happening. And then we have a culmination of this theme. And simply saying is like, I've written down some themes that I'm gonna read out loud to you, what this is bringing up in us. what we are being challenged by. And we could say they are like, with Saturn, we could say like old wounds are coming up. You know, it can be also frightening in all these changes. Like, wait a second, like, but I thought I am that. Like, there's old ways of thinking, you know, restrictive belief system, and painful memories, like fears, worries, like all this stuff is coming up and it has to be dealt with. Well, in the first moment, it probably feels like challenging and difficult, but with this Uranian energy there, we can also find new approaches. Like, what if I'm not how I used to do it normally? What if I'm asking for help? What if I'm trying a new way that I wouldn't have tried there before, and suddenly we find new approaches that really heal us, that really bring ways in that we haven't even imagined before. Another one is that the old one is collapsing. Saturn represents tradition. You know, that's what we have done every Christmas, that's what we have done every night, that's why we do it every year. Well, wait a second, why is that so rigid? Why is that necessary? Like, if that's collapsing, is that not even also an opportunity to grow into something that's actually true for us? So suddenly it's like, well, actually, if I would have the chance to do it different, how would I do it? Well, that's what's happening this year. And that's changing everything. Then we also have the old by Saturn is like the authority. Well, you don't question, that's what you have to do. Well, wait a second. It's not about authority anymore and just following and executing, you know, the demand, but actually thinking for yourself. Wake up and like, wait a moment. Like, what is true for you? What is the journey that you need to go on and that's alive and feels true for yourself, and honoring diversity and our own path, which is actually liberating, scary, because there's nobody to blame. You know, like, responsibility is nice because you can say, well, he said. While individuation is something that said, well, I have to trust my own inner guidance and just see if that's really working or not. And that also means you're gonna live from your own experience, and that maybe makes a failure even making you more authentic. Then where we have the all this like power to the others and this responsibility I was just talking about versus what we are capable of. So I kind of shared that just in other words. So that's that. And then we can also say the all is like the tradition and the comfort zone. Like, we don't have to question things. We don't have to kind of go our own way. And that brings us onto a domain that we probably are not so familiar with. And when things are collapsing, it brings us into a zone of the unknown. So freedom is not just like, oh, I'm just going to live my dream. It's going to be so nice and I'm just going to do everything that I always wanted and then finally free. It's like, wait a second. This is like uncharted territory, like where I'm going from here. This is really new and scary, because you really have nobody's footsteps to follow in. And that means living your own dream or being true to yourself is the most liberating and the most scary thing you can do, but it's therefore the most rewarding thing you could ever imagine. And it makes you feel alive in every single moment because nobody has been there before you. And then also, just to kind of finish that theme with, is like, when we are going into destruction, or we can say when there's all this crumbling, there can be a pain or a fear there, because it's like, oh my God, like, this is not comfortable. This is feeling like real, like painful. This is feeling like I'm never gonna get out of this black hole. It's like, yeah, but you know, becoming aware of what's not true anymore doesn't mean you have to fill that space with just something else. You don't have to just kind of know now what's the new, but it's actually becoming comfortable in space, in the unknown, in openness, in waiting of what's coming to you, and actually not looking for like, well, I'm not this anymore, well then I'm this, and I'm just changing everything outside. No. Let's do that slowly. Let's come to a place where we really feel actually this is allowed to fall away. And I can be vulnerable, I can be grieving, I can be sad even, to say goodbye to my old self. But I can also come to a place where I feel thankful for the life I had and where it has brought me, and for where I'm right now. And for that, like, coming to a space where I'm really becoming available, I'm really becoming present, and connected, because there's such a place, it pushes me to be really available to what's gonna appear in front of me. And I think that's where meditation, that's where we actually need to ground more, where we need to come to a place where we realize, wow, right now so much is shaking up on an external and also on an internal, that it can be scary, can be overwhelming, and can be too fast. It can be bringing up old wounds. It brings up the need for security. It brings up the necessity for friends and belonging and community and love and care, which are all really important, but ultimately to also feel what's true for us. And that means that we need to take better care of ourselves. And that I will come to that more into the full moon. We need to take better care of ourselves in the sense of like, what do I need right now? How do I nurture myself? In times of despair and sudden changes, and where it's also an opportunity for growth, like how can I be more gentle with myself? And that's what we're going to explore more in the full moon together. So, this is the beginning of a new era. It's becoming tangible. It's not something lofty and it's like, wow, yeah, it's just some energy. It's like, no, this is intense. And just to summarize that for you and to end that up is like, maybe you have heard of solar flares, which is something that I'm really curious if this might happen to us, but it's very likely that if you have heard of solar flares, it's simply when the sun is having its own rhythm. It's almost like, imagine like the plasma that is on the surface of the sun is very active and it explodes. And it has its own rhythm where these explosions and activity is more quiet, and sometimes where it's more strong and explodes on the sun. So this is an 11-year period in which for 11 years the sun is more active, and then for 11 years it's more calm. So we are just at the beginning of a time period, so 2020 it started, where the sun is going to become more active again. So now imagine the plasma is like volcano erupting, and then when more heat of the sun is erupting and exploding, well, these explosions are so huge that they have an effect upon the Earth. Now, energetically speaking, these plasma flares or solar flares are then traveling towards the Earth, and then the magnetic fields are bouncing on each other, and the energy then is being absorbed by the North Pole and the South Pole, and that's what you see as the auroras. So this amazing spectacle of beauty that people travel to is actually energy being visible, like an overplus of energy that can be absorbed by the Earth. Now imagine, in every 100 years we are due to a massive event where this energy is affecting the whole world. Maybe you have heard in 1859 there was a Carrington event, and it has been said that these auroras, because the solar flares have been so strong, the auroras came down from the North Pole all the way to Mexico. I mean, imagine that you could see auroras all the way down to Mexico. I mean, this is amazing to understand or to think about. Now imagine that we are due to a solar flare and this would affect our world. Well, back in the 1860s, there was not a massive effect, but this energy, this electric energy is gonna impact the Earth so much that our electricity system, which is so fragile, is being able to completely eradicate. And that's depending on how we are prepared, and I just know we are very vulnerable, that the whole energy could actually turn off. That's our electricity system. So that's something that might happen, but I also want to say that not just because of that possibility. Also I want to say that because when the solar flares being traveling to the Earth, then they are like sun rays, you know, they have an effect on our personality, on our cells. Energy is affecting us. So for the next 11 years, there's an increased awakening, an increased shift of changes happening. So the next 11 years, so let's say especially like for the next, 5 years, where we also have Saturn in Aquarius, where we have Jupiter for the next year in Aquarius, and where we have Pluto coming into Aquarius. for the next 10 years, we are gonna undergo huge, massive changes that we cannot even imagine. And normally change hurts. Long term it's for the better, short term it's gonna leave us at a place where we haven't been before. It's almost like it brings all shit up in order to finally heal it. So this is what I want to share with you on a bigger picture, to now go into the full moon and speak more about Virgo. All right, let's speak more about the full moon in Virgo.